Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start with macro thoughts. This is Northman Trader, who's very pithy. The last bear on Twitter is taken away. That took me back to the 11th of November when I said the bots will be waiting for Santa Claus and a Christmas rally, so President Trump is wont to tweet stock market up big today, a new record enjoy, and there have been a series of records through the year. Lighthizer scores trifecta of wins for Trump's trade agenda. US trade chief just had a big week delivering key priorities. He also said that phase one is totally enforceable. US still has about $380 billion of tariffs on China. Gives us a lot of leverage in the negotiations. And I think because of the grandstanding and the propaganda and Trump's massaging, folks are missing the point. The point being that Lighthizer and the now vanished Peter Navarro have operated with surgical precision, in my opinion. And his point about 380 billion is the main overarching point. The discrepancy between imports into the United States versus exports into China, nearly 5-1, is the main overarching point in my view. Home thoughts. This is a hexagonal Sinter-Mani tile from Syria in the 16th century via William Dalrymple, and it certainly is impressive. From there it took me to Rumi, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 100 times. Come, come again, come. And that's written on the mausoleum in Konya, which I visited a few years ago, and it really had a powerful effect on me. I went back to Louis de Camoish. Love is a fire that burns unseen. Love is a fire that burns unseen, a wound that aches yet isn't felt, an always discontent, contentment, a pain that rages without hurting, a longing for nothing but to long, a loneliness in the midst of people, a never feeling pleased when pleased, a passion that gains when lost in thought. It's being enslaved of your own free will. It's counting your defeat a victory. It's staying loyal to your killer. But it's so self-contradictory. How can love, when love chooses, bring human hearts into sympathy? And another quotation which I like, time changes and our desires change. What we believe, even what we are, is ever changing. The world is change, which forever takes on new qualities. I like this Anish Kapoor shooting in the corner via the Royal Academy and the Saatchi Gallery. Very powerful given what's happening right now in India. I'm reading Homeland by Fernando Aramburu. It's the story of two families in a Basque village. It toggles back and forth in time, illuminating the enmity between members of multiple generations and hinting at a once and future closeness. It hinges on a particular akinza or attack by members of the paramilitary organization ETA. Its protagonists are the matriarchs of these families, spiteful Miren and grief-stricken Bitori, as well as their daughters Aranza and Nerer. It is these women who make things happen. The men who kill and are killed are mere jellyfish in the wash of history. Mario Vargas Llosa, who I consider one of the greatest contemporary writers today. It's been a long time since I've read a book that was so persuasive and moving, so intelligently conceived, and indeed he's correct. I'm enjoying it thoroughly. This is the Chalbi Desert in flood via Kenya Pics. And this is a bed under the stars, just a few meters from your bed inside a luxury safari tent, Linyanti expeditions from bush camps, Africa, the safari rich. Political reflections. Johnson welcomed Monday 109 new Conservative lawmakers to Parliament and promised Brexit will be done soon. The pound is back to where it was just and below where it was just before Thursday's exit poll. We're currently at 131.12. So that has been a boom and a bust, and the reasons being that he is speaking of a hard close on Brexit, and people are now fretting that this could mean an exit, a hard Brexit. Interestingly, Boris Johnson's victory by country, virtually half the vote in England, over a third in Wales, just a quarter in Scotland, and none in Northern Ireland. Not a very United Kingdom, says Charlie Robertson. Another point of interest, how Britain voted at the 2019 general election by age. And this was the youthquake, 18 to 24-year-olds, 56% voted Labour, 21% Conservative, 11% Lib Dem, 70 plus, 67% Conservative, only 14% Labour, 11% Lib Dem. So as societies have aged, they've become more conservative, haven't they? The age at which a person becomes more likely to vote Conservative than Labour is 39, down from 47 at the last election. Have a listen to this fellow, Mr. Michael Spicer, on Boris Johnson via Sky News. It's quite hilarious. Trump sent an angry letter to Speaker Pelosi protesting the impeachment. This is via Andrew Feinberg. I wrote on the 4th of November that POTUS was undergoing an impeachment process at the hands of nervous Nancy Pelosi, his moniker, which is probably a linguistic transference of a sort in that she makes him nervous. And in that same article, I was quoting William Golding's The Spire, and he writes in that book, at the moment of vision, the eyes see nothing. And I was saying the moment of vision is in essence a non-linear thing. It's a moment of deep insight. This photograph is from Narendra Modi's RSS days via India History Pic. You will notice the uniform is extremely similar to the Nazis. 2nd of December, I was writing about the politics of ethnocratic nationalism. This was a tweet from the BJP. Rana Ayub shared it. Remember what the students in India are protesting against. As rage spreads, time to ask what India voted for. Just 7 months ago in the general elections, India gave a historic landslide victory to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was elected for a second consecutive term with a rare single-party majority. Such an electoral feat has not been seen in India since the 1970s. With 303 seats out of 545 seats in Parliament, Modi and his party, the BJP, dominate India's political landscape. Ideally, this should have led to political stability, economic progress, and assure an international standing for India that it has long deserved. But 8 months on, the economy is in a shambles. Its international reputation is diminishing, students are up in arms, and several states are in turmoil. Protests over the new citizenship law have spread to the 6 states in the northeast, the capital city of New Delhi, the most populous state of Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Maharashtra. In an election rally in the state of Jharkhand on Sunday, Modi tacitly blamed Muslims for the spreading protests and said, "Those spreading the fire can be identified by their clothes." He said this on a day when police officers in the national capital of Delhi were beating up students from a premier university that is known for hosting largely Muslim students. By the end of 2018, months before the general elections were due, it was clear that India's economy was in a mess. Economic growth has crashed, industrial production, private consumption is down, unemployment at its highest in 45 years, food price inflation in double digits, household incomes have shrunk. The Prime Minister's 2014 slogan that "good days are coming" has been abandoned even by his party. However, the Prime Minister has rarely spoken about the failing economy, if at all. On most days, he is heard assuring citizens that India will have a $5 trillion economy by 2024. No one seems to know how India will climb out of its current economic morass to hit that target. Economic growth, I wrote on the 2nd of December, has fallen for 6 consecutive quarters. The last GDP figure is the weakest recorded under Modi, who first swept to power for 5 years ago, promising to take India's economy to new heights and create millions of jobs every year. So it really is a debacle, and this is the issue with the politics of ethnocratic nationalism. This is an Indian Ocean spy map of Jan van Winschoten, Amsterdam 1596, via William Dalrymple, secretly copied Portuguese sea charts while acting as secretary to the Archbishop of Goa. He published these in Amsterdam after escaping from Goa. August 2013, I said I have no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days, and it's very much the epicenter of geoeconomics, in my view. August 2018, I was writing about the Indian Ocean economy in a portrait, and I conducted an interview earlier this year with Maria João Lopo de Carvalho about Louis de Camões, who was the explorer poet I was quoting earlier, who came all the way from Portugal round the Cape of Good Hope. He stopped in Mozambique, he stopped in Mombasa, and he went all the way to the Spice Islands in Indonesia and Macau. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar is last at 111.31, dollar index 97.28, Japanese yen 109.44, Swiss franc 0.9806, the pound is at 113.91, very soft. Aussie 0.6843, India rupee 71.07, South Korean 111.6856, Brazilian real 407.17, in line with the balance in emerging market currencies. Egyptian pound 16.026, and the rand below that key level of 14.50 at 14.4225. Dollar index 97.229, obviously got a bit of a fillet from the recent weakness in the pound. Euro dollar 111.31, still safe haven. You can characterize it as a safe haven. When the market's uncertain, the euro tends to go up. No jolly season for Bitcoin. New recent lows, has not closed here since May. Last trading at 6,625. You know my thoughts about Bitcoin. I was bullish at $1,000 in 2017, January. We then had that humongous rally, which I think there was plenty of manipulation. We've spoken about that as well. And I essentially think it's worthless. And primarily I think it might very well turn out to be an Epstein Mossad type operation. Commodity markets, gold, let's take a look at where that is, 1477.90. Oil, what a rebound now, above $60.45. And within $2 of the Aramco attack closing highs. I wrote about Aramco, as you know. I thought it was a singular triumph for the Saudi authorities. In point of fact, I would have advised them to do precisely what they did: limit the supply, sell it into strong hands, make buyers and sellers come to Riyadh in order to transact in it. And I think they've parlayed it into the bulge bracket, their stock market, 7th biggest stock market in the world. And it's a significant achievement and a crystallizing of a one-off opportunity. Danilo Honorino quoted as saying, "This is the Ferrari of the oil companies, and if you want to buy this Ferrari, you need to go to Riyadh," and that's the overarching point. This is the chart from yesterday via Tassi Sek, who does some very nice charts out of Riyadh, I believe. Emerging markets, for emerging market stocks to outperform developed market stocks again, EM economies have to grow faster relative to developed market economies. That's from JS Blockland. Most likely no, President Paul Kagame said at the Doha Forum when asked whether he'd be seeking a fresh mandate. "I want to have some breathing space, but given how things are and how they've been in the past, I've made up my mind where I am personally concerned that it is not going to happen next time." Kagame, who's 62, has won international acclaim for stabilizing the coffee-producing nation and transforming its economy. Rwanda is one of the fastest growing African economies, with expansion expected to be 8.5% this year. Human rights groups, including Amnesty, have repeatedly accused his government of cracking down on political opponents in the media, has a very Maoist view of that. Western values such as democracy should not be forced on Africa because they are not the silver bullet for the continent's problems, and leaders there should only be answerable to their electorate, he said. Term limits don't mean one thing everywhere or every time, he said. However, this doesn't justify what some African leaders have done. Some people can spend longer time in office and it is justified, and others it is not. Some leaders make it look like it's the choice of the people and it is not. And where it happens, it should be respected. He was my guest on Mindspeak, and a very inspirational speech he made. Lord says I shall one day rule Zimbabwe, says Nelson Chamisa. MDC leader Nelson Chamisa says the Lord Jesus Christ has spoken and assured him that he shall one day rule Zimbabwe. The Lord has spoken to me lately that one day I will lead this country. I do not know when or how this will happen, but he has spoken to me over this issue, said the Harare pastor. I've written about Zimbabwe many times. The last time I was talking about born-free generation, the fact that, this born-free generation is being held hostage by those who fought the colonialists. Drought adds to debt, leaving Zambia and Zimbabwe in the dark. Rolling electricity blackouts lasting 18 hours a day have choked the two economies. Ballooning debt has left them unable to import enough power to help cushion shortages. Even if they could, the region's biggest supplier, Eskom, doesn't have enough capacity to keep the lights on in its home market, South Africa. The power crisis in the three countries has exacerbated economic strain. Zimbabwe's GDP is expected to shrink this year, 6.5%. Zambia is on course for the slowest expansion in more than 2 decades, and South Africa is staring down a second recession in as many years. Everything has come to a head at a very unfortunate time, but the problems had been brewing. They can't actually afford to replace their capacity. It's either a sharp increase in tariffs or it's got to be funded by the taxpayer. Turbines at Kariba, the world's biggest man-made reservoir, could be forced to shut completely after water levels dropped to the lowest level in 23 years and continue to fall, a disastrous scenario for both economies. Electricity prices will need to rise. That will add to inflation. Zimbabwe's consumer prices surged an estimated 481% last month. Borrowing more for plants will be difficult. Zambia's sovereign debt will reach 96% of GDP next year, and Zimbabwe can't take on more debt until it settles its arrears. The impact is going to be substantial. Electricity is the lifeblood of any economy. Both are at their own tipping points. Zimbabwe has been at that tipping point since the beginning of the year, if not before. And Zambia, they've blown the cash. They got no money in the bank. Vanillanomics is a super article in Business Week about the vanilla market. The only people who drive on this road, he told our photographer and me via our translator, are people who want to kill their cars. To buy vanilla, you've got to go deep, deep undercover in Madagascar. Somewhere on the other side of that water, dozens of farmers would soon converge upon a regional vanilla market in the village of Tanambao, Betsi Vakini. Growers would negotiate with buyers working on behalf of exporters and international flavouring companies, and together everyone would hash out a collective per kilogram price for the crop. Most buyers would pay cash on the spot, and the farmers would hand over several tons of green, freshly harvested vanilla beans. Those humble beans whose essence is associated with all that's bland and unexciting have somehow metamorphosized butterfly style into the most flamboyantly mercurial commodity on the planet. Northeastern Madagascar is the world's largest producer of natural vanilla. So every boom and every bust slams this region like a tropical storm. When prices peak, cash floods the villages. When prices fall, it drains away. Extreme isolation of these communities, their dominance over the international supply, the dramatic changes they undergo during price swings, all of it has turned this part of the country into a semi-contained observation lab that exposes both the genius and the insanity of globalized commerce. Some of the bags weighed more than 40 kilograms, and for the farmers this was the easy part. They'd spent months in the fields, closely monitoring their vines for any sign of a bloom. When they found a vanilla orchid in flower, they rushed to hand-pollinate it. Each flower's fertilization period lasts only a few hours each season. If they missed that window, the plant wouldn't produce beans. Then, as the beans matured on the vine, the farmers hand-stamped the pods with a personalized braille-like marking, the horticultural equivalent of a cattle brand, so thieves would have difficulty passing them off as their own if they tried to sell them. The farmers slept in the fields at night, machetes by their sides, guarding their plants through rain, heat, and the buzz of malarial mosquitoes. For many of them, an entire year's income depended on this auction. One at a time, the farmers entered the hut and emptied their bags of beans onto the floor. Government-authorized inspectors sifted through the beans, making sure they were all suitably large and ripe. They rebagged the beans and clipped the sacks to the scale outside, then logged the weight of each farmer's harvest in a ledger. The process can take a day or a week. If this one stretched into tomorrow, most of the farmers and collectors planned to search for a friendly villager with a little extra floor space where they might curl up and sleep. It seemed more important to simply observe this whole business in a particular way, with a sustained appreciation for how incredibly wild global trade at its most elemental level actually is. In 1836, a Belgian horticulturalist figured out why. They emerge from the flower only after it's pollinated by one of two rare species of bees native to Mesoamerica. 5 years after that discovery, a young slave named Edmund Albius from the island of Reunion realized he could hand-pollinate the orchids by carefully manipulating the male and female parts of the plant. His ingenuity transformed vanilla into a cultivable crop, and small plantations began popping up all over the world. The orchid seemed to grow especially well in Madagascar, 500 miles due west of Reunion in the Indian Ocean. Vanilla, in its essence, is an adventure story. For the next 150 years, vanilla played it straight, drawing little attention to itself. By the 1980s, Madagascar was producing about 30% of the world's supply. For the past 4 years, prices have been riding high, flirting with $600 in 2018 and rarely falling below $400 since. The spike is sometimes, this is a kilogram, the spike is sometimes attributed to a 2015 announcement by Nestle that the company would use only natural vanilla in its products instead of imitation flavouring. Northeastern Madagascar is so impoverished. When vanilla prices aren't high, banks and other financial institutions don't open a branch near many villages. Farmers are more likely to bury cash under their houses than put it into an account. Consequently, money in northeastern Madagascar is not perceived as a straightforward interest-based sum accumulating over time in an orderly fashion, according to a study published last year in American Ethnologist. Anna Zhu, the author of the report, wrote that money in the vanilla-grown region is instead treated as a volatile material that comes and goes, imbuing the region with fantastical undertones of alternating abundance and dearth. The sporadic abundance has generated a new genre of local storytelling, almost folkloric in nature, that catalogues local examples of financial decadence. It's called vola mofana, roughly translated as hot money spending, and the tales that illustrate the concept are difficult to verify but easy to repeat. Vola mofana stories, she says, don't describe an awkward phase of Madagascar's economic development. Rather, the profligacy they recount can be considered a tactical weapon deployed by residents against the erratic, non-linear development that characterizes globalization today. Isn't that brilliant? By treating money so cavalierly, either literally or figuratively, the vanilla farmers diminish the power the modern economic order can exert upon them. Actions that seem to defy logic actually reflect and often resist the magicalities inherent in modern forms. Then they're talking about how they couldn't buy vanilla for 3 days until the government printed more money and sent it up here. It was crazy. When the crop is expected to be healthy, all of that is turned upside down. Farmers feel less pressure to pick their beans early. They allow the vanilla to mature in the flower and develop a richer flavour, and prices generally tend to stay lower. It's what market economists call a perverse incentive. The worst vanilla by far that I've ever seen in my life was the stuff they sold for $650 a kilo. Largest currency denomination is worth little more than $5. And then saying that somebody came and took all the cash, and no one had any cash to buy the vanilla. Connoisseurs describe vanilla from Indonesia as earthy and smoky, from Uganda as chocolatey, from Tahiti as fruity and flowery, from Mexico as hinting of clover and nutmeg. But the Malagasy stuff tastes like what people expect from really good vanilla: rich, sweet, creamy. These subtleties might help explain, to a fractional extent, why Madagascar dominates the trade. What a brilliant article, Business Week, well worth reading in full. This is the road on the way to Tanambao. Betsy Vakini is sighted one of Madagascar's many regional vanilla markets. This is Zidane in his family's vanilla fields. He and his father pollinate their vanilla orchids by hand. After the beans appear, they'll sleep in the fields to protect the crop from thieves. Zambia has legalized the production and export of cannabis for economic and medicinal purposes, the government's chief spokeswoman has said. Their motivation is rooted in a hefty fiscal deficit and growing debt burden, growth in external debt to $10.5 billion at the end of 2018. Zambian opposition Green Party President Peter Sinkamba, who has been advocating the export of cannabis since 2013, so the move could earn Zambia up to $36 billion annually. South African All Shares up 8.7% year-to-date, dollar rand at 14.42, but has broken key resistance, Egyptian pound 16.0281. EGX30 up 4.54% year-to-date. Happy birthday, Mr. President. This is President Buhari. Personal aides and a few close friends paid him a visit at home. Nigeria's inflation rate rose to 11.9% in November as food prices continued climbing following the country's border closures. That goes back to the whole story about food, chicken. I don't get it. A chicken place way they no get chicken, said Funke Akindele Bello. Big squeeze in chicken. Apparently they're being buried in mass graves in Benin because they can't get over the border. Moody's Investor Services downgraded Nigeria to negative, and we learned that foreign investors are propping up the Naira to the tune of $16 billion via short-term certificates. Everyone knows how this story ends. When the music stops, everyone will dash for the exit, and the currency will collapse, just like it's collapsing in Lusaka. Nigeria matters. It has not posted positive GDP growth above its population growth for a number of years. The Nigerian All Shares down 15.18% so far this year. Ghana Stock Exchange down 10.33% year to date. Angola's retrieved more than $5 billion in stolen assets amid a crackdown on graft. Vodafone Group targets Africa's unbanked with ambitious plans for M-Pesa. M-Pesa was launched in Kenya a decade ago as a peer-to-peer mobile money service for people without a bank account, and has grown into Africa's largest payment service. A push to offer more sophisticated financial and e-commerce services could open the door to a stake sale to highlight the business's value, something I was recommending a few years ago. Analysts see M-Pesa, like the towers, as an underexploited asset on Vodafone's balance sheet. Shareholders attribute it little value because they regard it as a small part of a mature telecoms company, rather than as a pioneering fintech business. It only accounts for 3.5% of revenue at Vodacom, Vodafone's African arm, applying a valuation in line with other payment technology companies, roughly 20 times earnings, would make M-Pesa worth as much as $1.5 billion, 3 times its current implied value. Vodafone's strategy is to expand M-Pesa's business rapidly in the 7 African countries where it already operates, as well as new markets such as Ethiopia, where the British company has no telecoms network. I believe we can turn it into Africa's largest unbanked bank, Mr. Reid told the Financial Times. To achieve this, we need to explore strategic technology partnerships and work with key financial institutions. I believe there is the opportunity to roll out M-Pesa into other countries where we do not have existing mobile operations when the platform is further developed. Basic phones were replaced by feature phones and then smartphones, and M-Pesa's functions expanded to include the ability to pay for everything from electricity and rent to airfares. Now used by 2 in 5 Kenyans, the system provides the payments backbone to a multitude of digital services. Safaricom expects M-Pesa to account for more than half its revenue within 4 years, up from just over 30% currently. It's been launched in 6 other African markets, including Tanzania, Egypt, and Ghana, and the customer base is growing across the continent. Numbers rose 12% to 37 million in the year to the end of March. Revenues are up 21% to 750 million euros, and more than 10 billion euros is processed over the M-Pesa platform every month. Safaricom has been forced to allay concerns that M-Pesa could be caught up in tensions between the US and China. Safaricom and Vodafone migrated the M-Pesa customer base to Huawei's mobile money platform in 2015. Any move to disrupt M-Pesa would have a dramatic effect on the Kenyan economy. Joshua Oigara, head of KCB, he estimates that a quarter of Kenya's GDP is processed over the platform. As I wrote on the 10th of December 2018, Huawei is in the bloodstream of Africa's telecom infrastructure. How this plays out in Africa is now an above-the-radar issue. Safaricom closed at 30 shillings. M-Pesa revenue was up 18.2%. Growth was driven by a 12.4% year-on-year increase in 30-day active M-Pesa customers, 23.61 million. Excluding gaming revenue, Excluding gaming, revenue grew to 20.9% year on year. Kenya launches freight service on Chinese-built extended railway that connects the hinterland. This is Global Times. Nairobi Naivasha standard gauge railway cargo service and an inland container port expected to revolutionize transport of bulk cargo to the East Africa nations, hinterland and neighboring countries. President Kenyatta and Chinese State Councillor Wang Yong were among dignitaries who graced the launch of the SGR Phase 2A freight service and dry port located in Naivasha. Today we mark the commencement of the freight train services to Naivasha Inland Container Depot, thus making an unequivocal statement that we as a people are ready to ascend, said President Kenyatta. We equally remain hopeful that other economic and commercial ventures will be established along the line, which together will trigger the creation of productive employment and in the process reduce poverty and inequality across the whole country. He said the operationalization of the SGR Phase 2A freight service in Naivasha's dry port will boost Kenya's status as a transport and logistics hub. Chinese State Councillor Wang Yong said the full launch of the Nairobi Naivasha SGR services marked another milestone in the history of railway construction in Kenya and Africa in general, also marked another major achievement of the China-Kenya, China-Africa cooperation on the Belt and Road Initiative. Wang said the project had showcased the mutual benefits and shared development through China-Africa cooperation, adding that China will adhere to the principles of sincerity, real results, affinity and good faith, and the approach of upholding justice while pursuing shared interest in China-Africa cooperation. We will continue to promote Sino-Kenyan cooperation, such as facility connectivity within the framework of BRI to build a closer China-Africa community of shared destiny. Kenya's Petroleum Ministry now seeks a financial audit of the pilot oil export scheme run by Tullow from Turkana since March 2017. That's from Bank Kalele. Kenya Airways issued a profits warning statement that can be seen here via Rich Economics. Although revenue improved in the year, profitability was constrained by increased competition, which in turn increased pressure on pricing in order to remain competitive. Kenya Airways share price data can be seen towards the bottom of Rich wrap-ups. Nairobi All Share is up 13.87% year to date. NSE20 is down 8.61% year to date. And here's a lovely photograph I found of elephants in the Savo from the Sheldrick Trust. And with that, I shall take my leave.